my creation life. Buffering.
Wheel spinning.
Now we're buffering.
Yeah.
There are no beginnings or endings to this podcast.
Now we are live.
Oh, there we go. Hi.
That was a fell on our face intro.
Well, when was the last time we had a decent intro? Maybe the last time Ryan did our intros.
May 4th, 2015.
Yeah, when was episode 1?
All right. Well, first of all, now we haven't started the actual recording yet, but welcome everybody on YouTube.
Hey.
All of the none of you who have joined us so far, because right now the interwebs are busy sending out notifications to everybody. So we'll say welcome again a few times, I'm sure. But today we are doing kind of a winter media roundup.
That's a nice word for it.
Right?
Winter Media Roundup.
I'm very good at this.
The WMR.
No. So we'll talk about basically everything that's happened since
Sounds like a wrestling event, doesn't it?
Since Star Wars came out, I guess. Because I think that was the last time we did kind of one of these more relaxed, just media roundup episodes. So I think, as far as I know.
I would say that's about right.
Hello, Channing.
Hey.
Tatum.
I was going to say Channing Tatum.
Channing Brown.
Channing. Hey.
Which, yes, of the Boston Browns, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hello, Channing. So should we get started? I guess I'll just pull up
your insults for the day.
No, I'll pull up the new audio file. Okay, we just need to make sure that this is actually recording, and it is. All right. Let's do this thing.
It's not recording from your laptop speaker again? So we're going to sound like we're in a can?
No, not from the laptop speakers. Todd, say things real quick.
Things real quick.
Okay, shut up. Kyle,
things real quick. Things real quick.
You're the worst people I know.
WMR, I'm thinking like weapons of mass ridiculousness.
Nice. Right here.
Okay, so I am about to...
You fitted so well with all of this.
Okay. I'll take it.
Yeah, we'll call him a sub. We'll call him the alternate. All right.
Man.
Hey, you need points scored by the bench, man. If the bench isn't scoring points, you're going to lose the game.
Yep. Bring in that second unit. I just wanted to see Craig's face when I said second unit.
Well, when you don't need a second unit when you're me. I'll let you judge what that means.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's get going. Here we go. Welcome back, everybody, to the Legendarium podcast, episode number 171. I'm going to call this one Broken Promises, because last week I said that this would
Sounds
be...
like a Taylor Swift song.
I know. It was, isn't it? I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm not very familiar with...
I'm sure that she's watching right now live on Facebook, so Tay, let us know.
It's not Facebook. You loser.
It's on YouTube.
Whatever,
Live.
I don't know. It's all the socials of the media.
I'll get back to why that's the name of this episode. It's not really the name. But I'm Craig Hanks, your host. And over there, he's so old, we're renaming tonight's probable Best Actor winner, Gary Youngman. It's Todd Wente.
Wow, did you know it was my birthday this week? Oh, that's right, yes you did.
And he couldn't lose his virginity until he bet it in a poker game. It's Kyle Lemon.
I guess I'm just straight flushed right now.
Oh.
I think you must have peeked at your insult to prepare that one.
I'm just
So last week it was a Narnia episode, and I promised everybody that we were going to do, what's that one thing called? Oathbringer. And then some stuff happened, and some scheduling, and the Oscars, and it turns out Ryan...
And Taylor Swift wasn't able to join us.
Right. Now you've got my imagination going. I hear she's not lovely in person.
Pass.
I knew she was trouble when she walked in.
You can get out now. Okay, so no, you guys are really, really derailing me here today. So
You're welcome.
today it was supposed to be an Oathbringer.
Yes,
We're
it was.
not doing Oathbringer
No, we're
because scheduling issues. I think Ryan is. He said he was babysitting, but honestly, it's Oscars night. We all know what Ryan's doing right now. Anyway, so we scrapped that. Today we're going to do, what did we call it? A winter movie roundup.
Winter media
Winter
roundup.
media roundup, because it's going to be about more than just the movies.
The
So,
WMR.
Todd, you must be looking forward to this, because you always like these kind of weird little episodes.
I do. I enjoy them so much.
Yeah, so
I have things.
anyway, so Todd's going to air his things, apparently. And Kyle and I are going to do...
We're going to get it on video.
Before we get started, obviously we've already mentioned Patreon at the top of the show, but I'll say reddit.com. So thelegendarium.reddit.com is where you can go join the conversation. I hope you do that and yell at us for all of our
asinine information that we'll be sharing.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of opining, and we all know how that goes. That tends to go poorly with the Legendarium. So, yes, lots of opining today. Now, and the other thing is YouTube. Yes, we are starting to try to make our presence a little bit more known on YouTube. So if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, please go do so. That would be much appreciated. What we're going to do, we will air our episodes kind of on some of the smaller ones like this. I think we'll do a lot of these live streams so that people can jump in and give their comments and whatnot. But I think with some of the bigger ones, like we've been doing with Oathbringer, we will record them not live,
and then push them later,
and then push them out later.
Yeah.
So anyway, yes, we do need a little more time to birth those Oathbringer episodes, YouTubeally speaking.
Wow. I'm not even going to touch that.
Anyway, so yeah, just go search the Legendarium podcast on YouTube and find us there and subscribe. Now, on to what we've been watching. The big thing now, the first thing that we have to discuss will be Black Panther.
Yeah.
We have to talk about Black Panther. That is the 500-pound jungle cat in the room. So we will get there. But we've also, I want to talk about...
the 500-pound jungle cat?
Yeah. I also want to talk about Jumanji.
Okay.
I want to talk about Annihilation.
Ooh, yeah.
I want to talk about Cloverfield Paradox, Altered Carbon, Future Man.
And you're going to let us talk about anything?
Shannara. Well, I did put down...
Shannara Twain.
Shannara Twain.
And Star Trek...
Star Trek Discovery.
Star Trek Into Streaming, I think was that the alternate name, maybe? Anyway, so yeah, Star Trek, and what's the not Star Trek called?
Orville.
That's the one, Orville.
Yeah,
so
we're definitely going to be talking about those.
A lot of things on the docket today, but first things first, let's talk about Black Panther.
Yeah.
So we've all seen it. Well, I mean, according to the box office receipts, everybody in the entire Western Hemisphere has seen it at this point. So.
Yes.
Kyle, thoughts on Black Panther? I'm just going to leave it open for you. What's the first thing you want to say about Black Panther?
I really, really enjoyed it.
Okay.
I thought that it's probably the first real Marvel movie with a villain that I could get behind as far as like what their motivations are. I could really empathize with the Killmonger character on why he was trying to take over Wakanda and do his whole thing. I thought that Marvel did a really good job of bringing that story arc in and transitioning from just like, here's a random bad guy going to go up against the superhero who's got the same superpower and they're pretty throwaway, and making it concrete where, at the end, King T'Challa realizes, hey, he's got kind of a point. Like, he's going about it the wrong way, but he's got a point, and I can buy into that. And so he actually changes a little bit based on that.
Okay, Todd, what are your thoughts as of right now?
So, and I saw it opening night, as did at least half of the Western world, and have had a lot of time to think about it. I've read a couple of other reviews, and everything that I've read and everything that I've seen people talk about reflects that attitude. great villain. And in many cases, why did we throw him away so fast? Why did we get rid of him so quickly? Well, you kind of had to because of the way the story was written. But hey, it's the movies. No one ever really dies. Who knows? Maybe we'll see him come back somehow. Personally, as far as it being again, coming at it from the standpoint of, I've got the comic book tradition as well and seeing what they're doing with it. They did a wonderful job of taking several really powerful Black Panther stories and weaving them into this new iteration, and did so in a way that was approachable for average viewers, for people who had come in and not known anything about really what Black Panther was, except that he was a superhero from Africa. But they also did it in a way that was very respectful of the source material, at least that I felt was respectful of the source material. And that's a big thing for me. Marvel has done a better job of that than DC has, typically. At least I think that's partly because DC keeps forgetting which source material they want to use. They've got so many different ways to go about it. But Marvel's been pretty stable in the way that they've approached it. They've used it as a great piece to introduce some questions that I don't think are really addressed in any of the other Marvel films. The question of, okay, so great, you've got all the and we always hear it in the Spider-Man movies, with great power comes great responsibility. And in none of the other ones do they really do very much with that great responsibility. They, the only thing that they do about this responsibility is they run around and blow entire city blocks up because they're the only ones who can. But in this one, they draw the question, well, yes, we can, but is that really the way that we should be using all of these powers? Is that really the way that we should be doing all of this? And there was a very heavy moral question of what's the right use of power. They introduced that a little bit with Civil War, which is also where we start to see Black Panther's story get woven into this. But they continued it very nicely into the Black Panther, and I've really enjoyed it.
I think this movie was misnamed. It should have been called Wakanda, because frankly, the thing that struck me when I walked out of the theater was, this was barely about the Black Panther at all. This was about Wakanda. Mm-hmm. And the Wakanda question.
Yeah, I can see that, and
because it goes along with what you're saying. What do we do with our power? T'Challa never has to ask himself, what do I do with this amazing Black Panther power that I have?
Oh no, he's always known.
It's what does Wakanda do with its superpower, which is this magic rock.
Well, and there was another thing too that's very interesting about that, though. One of my coworkers came back from having seen the movie. She waited 3 weeks, bless her heart, and came back and said, "Boy, I just think I want to go live in Wakanda." And I said, "Keep in mind, it's a monarchy. It's not even a constitutional monarchy. It's a monarchy. I don't know that it's necessarily everything that we think it is."
Yeah, well, that's where the movie is good. My thought on Black Panther kind of as a whole is it was a very good movie.
Yeah. And
it tiptoed right up to the line of being great, and then every time it did that, a rhinoceros would show up on screen and be like, oh okay.
Great CGI rhinos, by the way.
It was a very good movie. I had a great time watching it, but it does not escape the orbit of Marvel movie general feeling, right?
Yeah, no, it can't go too much farther than that.
Right. And what I mean by that is there are some really great moments, like the casino scene. They show up in this casino, and you're thinking like, oh, they're going to do this kind of whole James Bond thing, and they're going to play some games, and it's going to be fun. And then it just turns into a CGI gun battle car chase. And it was so, like, as soon as that started, I just, here we go. And halfway through the car chase, which was pretty good, but because I was so excited for something different when the car chase started, I was halfway through it, and I'm like, I'm just so freaking bored.
See, and this is the thing that amazes me, is you keep thinking that these movies might do something different than they would in the comic books.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Sorry, we interrupted that.
But yes, you did. But the same thing happens at the end of the movie, too, where there are all these questions coming up, and you're expecting this big confrontation between T'Challa and Killmonger, and it's going to be epic and wonderful. But it's so full of ideas, right? Right, until they all pull out their spears and their rhinos and start murdering each other. Just like, it just felt... It felt like the end of Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman was, it had all these wonderful, interesting things to say. It was very interesting, and then CGI monster at the end tries to murder everybody. Kind of along those same lines.
I get it.
The one thing, the one thing I think that Black Panther has done to the masses is tricked the masses that it's not formulaic when it is.
Oh, it's
absolutely
incredibly
formulaic. Yeah.
But I do. You see a lot of the reviews out there. They're like, "Oh, it's breaking the mold, and it's not. It's doing something different than any other Marvel movie." And it is on certain levels, but it's so formulaic, in terms of arc and what happens. Like you said, you get this whole build up between the two, and it just breaks back down into just another battle royale.
All of that stuff I think really became apparent in the lead up to the movie, which was the most annoying thing about the movie. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. I have my little nitpicks, and we can talk about those as much as we want. But the media coverage of the movie is what really bothered me more than anything.
Yes.
This was the movie that was going to save us all, and it turns out it's a Marvel movie. And now it's a good Marvel movie. I'd put it kind of in the upper tier. It's not as good as Winter Soldier. It's probably not as good as the first Iron Man.
And what I would say is it's formulaic, but it executes that formula really well. So it does it better than a lot of the Marvel movies that are doing the same formula, but it executes it better. And we talked about the Killmonger and being the villain. It's still a very formulaic villain arc. He just is a very intriguing villain, and he plays it really well. And
he was well played. He was well cast.
Well written.
The guy who played M'Baku, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but what a wonderful foil for T'Challa about the idea of, and I read this in a review as well. It was nicely put. The idea of the one has stayed with Wakanda, one has left Wakanda, but they both say that they're working for Wakanda. And what does that do to your perspective of it? That was beautifully done, nicely portrayed, well acted. He was probably my standout favorite.
Michael B. Jordan, you mean, or the guy that plays Jamaica?
No, the guy that played M'Baku.
M'Baku, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry, I get the names mixed up. Surprise.
That's okay.
My standouts were Michael B. Jordan and Andy Serkis, who was so fun.
And again,
got
rid of him
villain.
so too quick.
Yeah.
Claw is a villain in the Marvel Universe that pops up every 5 years or so, and you go, oh my gosh, he's still around.
And he'll pop up again in this one after this.
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think is interesting, and I find it fascinating, and I don't know that we here have been guilty of this, but I think most of the media, and maybe the media hype is not guilty of it. But it seems like every time a Marvel movie comes out, there is this feeling that this is going to be, that there is going to be something about this that will be different than a Marvel movie. And I keep looking at it going, why are you expecting them to mess with it?
Right.
It's based on the comic books. It's based on a long series of comic book traditions that is about the battle royales.
Yeah.
It's about the lead up to these places where you find out that these people with these powers can do things that no one else can, and that's why they do. So, I keep being amused when somebody says, oh, this is finally going to be the Marvel movie that isn't like all other Marvel movies, and I go, yeah, it is.
Well,
it might insert something that gives you one different question to ask, but it's not going to be different.
And there is, I think, some value in that, because there is at the Disney, at the House of Mouse, as they call it, there is evidence now. I can't really get this sentence out. This is so difficult. There is evidence now that they cannot stray from their storylines.
Yes.
The Last Jedi. I'm sorry to all of those of you who loved it. Well, it's kind of a hashtag sorry not sorry thing, but that was a mess. That was a mess of a movie, and it's largely because they tried to stray from the Star Wars formula so much that it crashed and burned and fell on its face.
and I remember when we were talking about it, I think we did a formal review of it and chatted about it, and we talked about the idea that they knew they needed to go with they need to do things that attracted a new fan base, and so they weren't worried about offending their current fan base as much as they were worried about making it interesting to the new fan base. You know, come on board, and in doing so, they offended just about everybody to a certain extent.
Right.
None of us to the point where we are all saying, "Gee, I'm ripping off my Star Wars sleeves." And
I'm getting close, man.
Yeah, whatever.
I mean, the originals will always be the originals, but I'm having a hard time staying on the fan wagon.
You know what?
If you know what I mean.
I do. I understand, and I think we're going to see more of that, not less of that, over the next probably. I think Solo, a Star Wars story, is going to do that for a lot of us. Again, it's going to make us go, ugh, why couldn't they just leave Han Solo?
Oh,
alone?
it's that I've already planted my flag in this one. That movie's going to suck.
But again, I remember when the expanded universe, which is no longer canon, came out. By the way, if you've got expanded universe books, you're holding on to them, right? Because they'll be worth something one day. But when those expanded universe pieces came out, and there were a lot of us that held back and said, I'm not getting involved yet. And eventually they figured it out. It became great story material. I think that Disney's going to be able to do the same thing with Star Wars. I really do. And I'm just anxious to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I guess we'll see.
But from Marvel?
Yeah, I don't see that happening.
Happen.
Now, the most surprising thing about Black Panther to me, and this is going to be dangerous ground to tread upon for three white guys sitting in a basement in Utah. But the most surprising thing to me coming out of the theater was how the movie took its namesake and turned it on its head. Because the villain in the story is Killmonger, who espouses, as far as I can tell, something very close to the actual Black Panther ideology from the 60s and 70s, kind of that original movement. And he has a lot of great points. You kind of root for him a little bit until he starts getting kind of bloodthirsty and super racist himself.
Kind of bloodthirsty?
Yeah. But you're watching him and listening to him going, yeah, pretty much you've pegged it. You've pegged the issue of Wakanda and what it's, kind of done sitting on the sidelines. But then it ultimately pushes him aside and kind of goes for this, like, really, what do I want to say, kind of like a soft neoliberal solution at the end where it's like, how are we going to solve all of our problems? I know. Education centers in Oakland. Like, come on. In a way, come on. Like, that's not how you're going to affect real change. So anyway, but it was really interesting that it took the original Black Panther ideology and turned it on its head and said, no, we're going to kind of preach against that in the Black Panther movie.
It's funny you should mention that. One of the again going back to the source material, Stan Lee, when he introduced the Black Panther, did not realize that there was a neo-political movement called the Black Panthers that were going on at the time.
Oh, really?
He released this information at the same and released the character's name, the Black Panther, and they're not sure. You go back and you look at the history. It's tough to figure out. Did the political party start first, or did the character start first? Did the party pull its name from the character?
Right.
They're not sure. But Stan Lee, in order to deal with that, a couple of years later, had T'Challa change his name to the Black Leopard. And he actually said, well, the leopard is actually a panther, or the panther is a kind of a leopard, something like that. And he was trying to distance himself even then from the political ideology. So
and that's when Tom Hanks showed up and says, "I'm sorry, I ruined your Black Panther party."
How long you been waiting to say
I've been
the line?
waiting.
Do your Forrest Gump line again.
I'm sorry, I ruined your Black Panther party.
So anyway, it's interesting. They've struggled with it for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know about all that stuff.
I think they will forever.
Yeah. Well, anyway, do we want to talk more about Black Panther? I know this is the biggest movie event of all time, according to a lot of publications. We will talk about the Oscars, but the thing is, it's going to be really boring because even though it was released in 2018, Black Panther is just going to win everything this year, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's obviously Best Picture winner.
Best actor, best actress.
Obviously.
I thought we can talk about how it doesn't really do much to lead into Infinity War coming up.
Oh
in a
gosh,
couple months.
that's true.
Like, it really didn't do. I mean, now you've got Wakanda that is, they've recognized to the whole world, hey, we're this world superpower, and it shifts that whole dynamic. But it didn't really do a whole lot leading up to, like, what's going on with the last Infinity Stone, what's going on with all the other Avengers. Like, usually you have a little bit more tie-in in Marvel movies, and this one was pretty
separate.
Pretty separate.
Yeah, we
Which-
get that one,
which
we get that
I-
one view
I
of Bucky
like.
Barnes at the end, and that's about all.
Yep.
No, I really prefer it that way. I sort of feel the same way, if you don't mind a little bit of a left turn. Surprise, Craig's going on a tangent. I feel that way about Brandon Sanderson books too. Like with the Stormlight books, they're starting to bring in more and more of the other material from the Cosmere, and the more he does that, the more I think, I really wish he would just write this story. But I only feel that way a little bit.
Sure. No,
So,
I get it.
and kind of in both cases, I only feel that way a little bit. So it's really not that big a deal.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Again, in some ways, it's very formulaic because the Marvel and DC both have had a grand tradition since the mid '90s of about every 2 years or so having a huge crossover event across all of their comic books, and so it kind of makes sense that they're doing the same kind of thing, working through all of these movies and trying to do just enough to make sure that they remind you that it's coming without being too heavy-handed about
Yeah,
it.
it was just interesting because, like, the entire fan base was set on, this is where we'll figure out what the Soul Stone is. The Soul Stone's in Wakanda. We're going to find it. And that just kind of, I mean, it might be there. It probably is there. But it didn't say anything about it.
Yeah. And that is kind of like I was saying at the very beginning of our discussion on this. This movie kind of stands out from the other ones because Iron Man is about Iron Man. Spider-Man is about Spider-Man. Black Panther is about Wakanda. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit out of the mold in that way, at least. In that it's not concentrating on, like, the adventures of T'Challa. Like, he barely factors in, it seems like sometimes. It's all about the people around him, right? Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about some other things also. Anybody else here see Jumanji?
Yep.
Yeah? Todd?
I haven't yet.
No, okay, Todd, you're missing out.
That's what I've heard. I've heard that was the movie that was not redeeming at all, but lots of fun for people who play video games.
Let me put it in a way that you can understand, Todd. It is a ripping good yarn.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, Kyle, you went from here to here. Nicely done.
It sounds even more wrong coming out of anybody else's mouth. That's awful.
I love it.
No, it was. Yeah, I don't know that I have a ton to say about it, except that I was really pleasantly surprised with this because I hate reboots and sequels and the just never-ending stream of
franchise building,
unoriginal IP. I really like original stuff, actually, and we'll talk about this with the Oscar nominees coming up here in a little while. But when it comes to original IP, there is a serious dearth. And so when this Jumanji sequel reboot, what do they say on Mike Stoklasa calls it a soft C-boot sequel reboot prequel, and it's so I was not excited for that. Like, oh gosh, now it's going to be Jumanji, and they're going to kind of remake it, and there's going to be this board game, and nobody's going to care. And they didn't. They went kind of an original direction with it, a very original direction. So they took an existing intellectual property and made something fun and original from it. I really had a great time watching
And
that.
what was super refreshing is they didn't do what Hollywood thinks you should do always now and make it serious and dark. They went completely opposite and just made it fun.
So much fun.
And they did not take it seriously at all. As far as, I mean, the story works and everything, but it's not like there's some big, huge, life-changing event that happens, really. It's just, hey, here's a bunch of kids that get stuck in a video game, and it's a whole lot of fun.
The movie takes itself so not seriously that I couldn't tell if it was a joke or not when, is it Nick Jonas who shows up, and I'm like, oh, they got a Jonas brother, he'll be around for 5 minutes, and no, he's there for like half the movie.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of movie this is. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's got it's got The Rock and
Jack Black,
Kevin Hart and Jack Black. The Rock and Kevin Hart are in all the things right now, so that's no surprise that they're in it. Jack Black, this is like triumphal return.
I feel like he steals the show because he plays the 16-year-old girl.
Right. He's fantastic.
It's great.
And then Karen Gillan, who plays Nebula, among many other things. Obviously, I think she got her start on Doctor Who, or at least her big start.
Yes, she did.
She's wonderful. She's a very funny person, I think.
Yes,
so,
she is.
Yes, Todd, it's recommended. If any of you listening haven't seen it yet, definitely go see Jumanji or stream it now at this point.
Jungle.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle Soft Seaboot prequel reboot.
The fact that you got all of that out without stumbling over it, that was impressive.
So, what else? What are you guys watching? Todd, you wanted to talk about Star Trek a little bit?
Ooh, I did.
I'll give you 5 minutes.
So, have you guys watched Star Trek Discovery?
Negative.
Okay. So, I'll get my one gripe about Star Trek Discovery out of the way.
Wait, quick question. Did you subscribe to CBS All Access just to watch this?
So, I'll get my one gripe out of the way. I subscribed to CBS All Access just to watch this, like everybody else and their dog that was a Star Trek fan did. And if anybody from CBS is watching our little podcast, I'm not going to flip you the finger, but I'm really upset that you make me watch commercials out on a streaming service that I pay for.
Really?
Yeah, that's my one gripe.
Oh.
That's the only gripe.
That's a big gripe.
It's a big gripe, especially because I mean, if I were just smart enough to spoof my IP address and put myself in Canada, I'd be able to watch it for free on Netflix. It's go figure. As far as material, for those who are not familiar with it, it's set 10 years prior to the original series with Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock and the rest. There is a very specific tie-in that they don't do an awful lot with, but they do brush on it a couple of times, with the Michael Burnham character having been raised as a foster sister to Spock, and so she's been raised in a Vulcan tradition. Which in some ways it works, in some ways it doesn't. If you're a Star Trek fan, you can watch it and you can find out. The one thing about this film that is decidedly different is that it is a much darker rendition of what Star Trek is all about. This is
an Abrams take on the TV show.
Maybe to some extent that might be a fair way to describe it. They deal with something that is mentioned briefly in the original series, and that is that there had been a war with the Klingons before, and that there was some kind of a peace treaty that was arranged and negotiated and set up, and so that's why they're not at war with the Klingons anymore, but they have this demilitarized zone, the neutral zone, that they have to stay away from.
Is it Into Darkness with the torpedoes, and they go right up and then they fire the torpedoes, and like that's what that's all about, right? There's that border that they're not supposed to cross.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
It's the North Korea South Korea thing for the space.
I'm caught up. Okay.
But this series tells that story about how that happens.
Is it any good? Let's get there.
There are things about it that are really well done. There's some tremendous acting that goes on. I don't think I enjoyed the story as much as they wanted me to. There are some pieces about it that were really well done. They do a jaunt in the mirror universe. That's a blast. Oh my goodness gracious me, that's a lot of fun.
Is that like the episode of Red Dwarf where the evil twins put a little thing into
1/4 of the series is spent in the mirror universe,
Oh, really?
and so they spend a lot of time.
So it is like Red Dwarf.
Yeah, this.
You
Well,
don't know. You're not listening to the words I'm saying.
I
Todd.
I remember that episode. There's not enough about it that's the same, but it is from the standpoint that they get a chance to go into this other place and have to be their evil counterparts. Some great plot twists. One of them I figured out, and one of them surprised me. And anytime a science fiction series like that can surprise me, I'm very impressed with. As good as that is, as fun as that series has been, I enjoyed The Orville more. The Orville is the Seth MacFarlane's homage to Star Trek, and I think it was actually.
So it's not a straight spoof.
No, and I was expecting it to be. So were some of my. Have you guys watched any of The Orville?
No, why would I do that?
Okay, yeah, of course. I'm the science fiction guy in the room. Okay, thank you very much. The Orville was originally kind of presented as from the mind of Seth MacFarlane, so we were all thinking, oh, it's going to be like Family Guy's Star Trek spoofs all the time. It's not. It's a very human rendition of a science fiction Star Trek-ish kind of a show, but it's not a complete spoof. There are some funny moments in the first episode. They talk about what a lost or what an underappreciated musical genius Barry Manilow is. And that seems to be universally accepted, which is just delightful. And Kermit the Frog is the captain's mentor and inspiration for good leadership. But you know, some of these quirky kinds of things that are Seth MacFarlane make it human, but the story is very reminiscent of early Star Trek with better
visuals.
Much better visuals, and much more interesting storytelling. The originals were very moralistic. They were very morally driven. Gene Roddenberry wanted a thinking man's television show, and he got it right up until the point where the studio said, yeah, but he's got to punch people and lose his shirt and kiss a girl. And then Gene Roddenberry said, fine, we'll throw a character in that does that. Hence, we have Captain Kirk. But in this one, in Seth MacFarlane's Orville, it's a very different kind of a go. He's a human being, flawed and imperfect, and willing to face that and willing to admit it. His first in command, or his number one, is his ex-wife. Like that doesn't cause some problems on the ship. Just some really wonderful storytelling. They go into a two-dimensional universe at one point in time, and they have to try and navigate two-dimensional space. For those of you who don't think about those kinds of things, that's a really fun science fiction concept, and it was a blast. It's really, really, really good show.
Okay, all right. So you would recommend The Orville over Star Trek into streaming?
Slightly both. I like them both, but I would say The Orville was slightly more fun.
Okay,
it's a little more raunchy because it is Seth MacFarlane.
Seth MacFarlane, sure. Okay, very well. And the thing is, it might be raunchy, but as I understand it, the Star Trek reboot, Reboot prequel reboot, is quite violent.
Yes.
It's very loud and explosiony and fight scenes and all this, very violent stuff.
We had two episodes where they swore, which never
happens. Oh no, Tom,
never happens in Star Trek, right? My wife, bless her heart, she was like, I don't think I can continue to watch this if they're going to be swearing. And so, by the way, sweetheart, if you're watching, I love you. I'm not making fun of you. That's one of the idiosyncrasies you have. We have one where we were watching Klingon sex. That was a little bit uncomfortable. Glad my children weren't watching that with me.
So I should be watching this one. Okay.
There you go, Craig.
Let's move on then. Kyle, do you have anything that you wanted to bring up, or are you here to react?
Mostly here to react.
Okay.
I haven't been doing many. I mean, I've been trying to catch up on Mistborn.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Struggling there. I'm not gonna lie. I'm having a real rough time with Well of Ascension.
Yeah, we're gonna do a whole thing.
We'll
I
do
think
a whole thing
with Kyle separately.
But yeah, I've mostly been watching like Narcos and a couple other Netflix shows, which doesn't really fall in this realm.
Yeah,
it's great.
I just started The Tudors because I'm like, at a certain point you just need to not watch another sci-fi show.
Really?
So yeah, I mean I'm like 2 or 3 episodes in, and we'll see if I keep watching. But so far so good. It's interesting. It's entertaining. But anyway, what I've also started the first couple episodes of Altered Carbon. This is Netflix's new sci-fi series. Altered carbon is the idea is that rich people in the future are able to upload their entire personality onto a data chip in the back of their neck or at the base of their brain, and
Like
when
the
they're
Dwarf episode.
exactly. And when they die, or when their body dies, they call it a sleeve. A body is called a sleeve. And you can kill the body, but as long as that chip remains intact, it can just simply be inserted into a new sleeve, and you're good to go. And there's a guy, the richest guy on the earth is he's murdered or committed suicide. Nobody quite is sure which. He's convinced that he was murdered, but he can't remember like the day or two before, or whatever. And so he hires the world's or the galaxy's most notorious terrorist criminal guy to investigate what's going on with that. And so that's the setup for the show. This show, you know how there are a lot of shows where you say like, oh, you know, there's the pilot, but then like give it 3 or 4 episodes, it gets really good. Just takes it a while to find its groove. After a few episodes of this one, I'm gonna go ahead and just say, if you watch the pilot and you are either in or out, like that will tell you. This is a very clear pilot. This show is either for you or it's not for you, and it is. It's very paid cable. Tons of just extraneous violence and sex and you know, they go everywhere with it that you can imagine. And so if it sounds like you're bad, give it a shot.
I'm looking it up as we speak.
But you don't need to give it more than 1 episode to know exactly how you're going to feel about it.
I'm just thinking of like Bill Gates uploading his consciousness so that he doesn't have to have a body, and like a spin-off show
Exactly.
called Sleeveless in Seattle.
Wow.
Okay. All right. So, the other thing, I wanted to rip through a couple of these really quick. Future Man on Hulu. This is a Hulu original. Future Man is like a mix of a few classic shows and movies. Josh Hutcherson, guy from Hunger Games.
Yeah.
He is in the plot of Last Starfighter. And they make reference to this in the show, where he's playing a video game, and it's a little bit of an older video game, and everybody's kind of given up on it, but he's obsessed with it, and it's unbeatable, and he beats it, and then immediately 2 people from the future show up in his bedroom, and they're like, "You're the savior, you're Future Man," and he's supposed to save the future from
the evil invaders from the planet Zorg.
Well. It's Terminator as well, because there's a company that they come up with the cure for herpes, and it turns out that the cure for herpes turns people into it's like the Eloi versus the what do you call
The
them?
Morlocks.
The Morlocks. So the people who got this cure for herpes are like these wonderfully genetically superior human beings, and they stomp on the necks of the people who, you know, the lower class now, and it's completely bizarre. I made it through 1 season before I kind of gave up. It's kind of fun. It's definitely not appointment television, but it's, you know, if what I just described to you is interesting, go give it a shot. It's also got Haley Joel Osment,
Wait, what?
who shows back up and is funny. He's very funny.
Are there dead people in the future?
He plays. That's funny, Kyle. You know, not all of your jokes are landing today.
I don't care, Craig.
No, he.
That's the best part.
He plays an angry scientist / CEO. He's really good. So yeah, it's funny, but
Future Man.
I gave up on it after a while. This show is not for you, Todd. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Oh, it is funny. I will tell you one thing about it. This just one more like flavor thing about it. They go back in time to 1969 to kill the guy who finds the cure for herpes, and they don't end up killing him. But he ends up Josh Hutcherson's character ends up leaving behind his iPhone, and somebody sees it and has like. Is inspired to create this technology in the future. So Apple, and they had to go to a black sorority or a black fraternity party to find him. and this guy picks it up and turns apple into black apple. So when they go back to the future, everybody has black apples. And Siri is now a very sassy black man. It's very funny. It's little things like that. If that sounds interesting, you might like it. Okay, Shannara. I made it 2 episodes into season 2 of Shannara. I can't.
How did you make it through season 1?
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
well, I made it.
Of course.
I made it through season 1 because I was kind of almost contractually obligated to make it through season 1 because I was writing up some recaps for TVJelly.com. You can still go see those if you want. But anyway, season 2, I was thinking about doing some recaps for those. I don't know if I can do it. It's awful. It's awful, you guys. It's one of the worst. No, it is probably the worst adaptation I've ever seen in my life, just adaptation-wise. Anyway, but we don't have time to go into that. Annihilation.
Yeah, you were saying that you really enjoyed that.
No, I didn't say that.
The Mortal Kombat sequel?
The Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Wait a minute. Oh no, you said weird.
And I said weird AF.
Yeah, you did.
But
it seemed like in that same read that we were doing that you were saying that you enjoyed it.
Okay. So Annihilation, just to back up, this is a brand new sci-fi movie from the creators of what's that one called? The AI movie. Oh gosh, why is it escaping me?
Ex Machina?
Ex Machina, thank you. So from the makers of Ex Machina, this one stars Natalie Portman, and she goes with a team of female scientists into
Go girl power.
Sure. We can talk about that if we want to. It's kind of a non-issue in the movie, which is fantastic. But they go into this bubble they call Area X, and they can't get any signals in or out, so nobody has any idea what's in there. This is like where a meteor crashed, and they go in there to find out what's happening because the bubble is expanding and it's going to swallow up the Earth if it's given enough time. And her husband was one of the military men who went in, and then he comes out a year later and is not the same person. His eyes are blank and he doesn't have any memory of what happened in there, and so she decides she wants to go in to find out what's happening. And so these scientists all go in there and they're looking for answers. I'm going to try not to spoil too much because it is an interesting movie and I think I recommend it, but it's when they go in, they find out that it's changing things. It is refracting the way that light is refracted by a prism. This Area X, this bubble, is refracting DNA. And so it's taking existing organisms and altering their DNA and splicing it with other things and whatnot. So you get things that are kind of innocuous, like there's a plant with several different species of flower and leaf growing off of the same vine. So you get little things like that. Or you get a crocodile and shark mix. It's a crocodile that tries to eat them, and it has like shark teeth. Things like that. There's a bear. There's a bear that is blind and also learns how to shriek with the voice of one of its victims. And so as it's stalking them, you get some really, really creepy sound effects from that. So stuff like that. But then the real kicker is that it is altering the people that go in there. And some of the stuff that you get out of that, the body horror, is fantastic. That's the stuff that I really enjoyed. There's nothing creepier than the idea that you are no longer in control of your own body, and it really plays with that a lot in a few parts. That stuff was fantastic. The ending of it was the ending did not live up to the promise of the movie as a whole, and so it's hard for me to say like, oh, this is awesome and wonderful and everybody go see it, because I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. I haven't sorted out all my feelings, and I won't spoil the ending, but it is memorable, that's for sure.
And this has been opening weekend for that film.
I think so, yeah. I honestly, sometimes the bug just hits me, and I'm like, I gotta go to the movies.
Yeah.
And it's 9:30, and what's out, and that was one, so I went and saw it.
I was seeing some. I was seeing some review material that had come out from a couple of different writers about it, and they had similar things to say about it. That you're saying that there's a lot of really interesting things about it. It puts a lot of interesting ideas forward. None of them have gone as far as you have, as saying that it didn't necessarily live up to the promise on its conclusion, but they also didn't. They avoided that entirely and just talked about it more from the standpoint of it's an interesting science fiction film because it goes places that other science fiction films have not gone.
Yeah. I definitely left the theater satisfied. You know, I wasn't upset that I paid, $11 or $12 to go see a movie. And it was utterly terrifying in a few parts and really entertaining. The music was interesting. They made some interesting choices. The thing about it is, like, the whole thing is, it's supposed to be stretched really tight, like this, those horror movies where if you pluck them, they vibrate.
Yeah.
That kind of, like, and they do that with most of the score, too. It's this score that you barely notice. It just sits in your gut and makes you really uncomfortable most of the time. And then they do these flashbacks with her and her husband, and they kind of scatter them throughout the movie, and it's set to, like Crosby, Stills, and Nash or something like that, and it's really jarring. And so, in a way, it kind of mirrors what's happening with this refracted DNA. You have this movie that is two different, or maybe several different things, and it's trying to get mashed together into one. And the result is, like a lot of the things in Area X, it's not beautiful, it's not terrible, it's just off-putting, if that makes sense. So anyway, I would love to hear if anybody else has seen it. Hop on Reddit and let me know what your thoughts are. I am genuinely interested to hear what people thought of this movie, even if you hated it or loved it or whatever.
I'm curious. There was another science fiction film last year, the one about linguistics.
Arrival.
Arrival.
Arrival is the far superior movie, in my opinion. Just as in terms of the storytelling and having its say. Annihilation is pretty opaque as far as what are you getting at? Why are this is obviously a parable for something. You're trying to tell me something, and it never gets around to letting you in on that. Whereas Arrival, you may not agree with its messaging,
but it's pretty clear what it's saying.
But it's fairly clear without being too bash you over the head with it. I really prefer Arrival. It's fantastic.
That's good. That's good to know.
Anyway, okay, we should probably. Oh gosh, I wanted to talk about Cloverfield Paradox, but maybe we talk about the Oscars instead. Cloverfield Paradox sucked. So.
Didn't see it, so I won't.
Did either of you see it?
No.
No? Okay. Well, it's... it just makes me fear for Netflix. I've been such a fan of Netflix for the last few years, but lately it's just become... It's like the dumping ground. It's Hollywood's dumping ground.
Kind of is.
It's the way... It's sort of the way that you used to get movies... Studios would spend all this money on some production, and then they'd say, it's... this kind of turned into a bag of crap. Let's just put it on a VHS and release it, and maybe some people will rent it or whatever.
Send it to Blockbuster.
Yeah, exactly. Netflix is kind of taking on that role, and I don't like it.
There's, we in our house we use Netflix a lot to binge. Especially if we're watching old series, we've gone back and watched series that we really enjoyed, and we've rewatched them several times on Netflix. So we've liked that. I haven't had to go out and buy every DVD that's being released in order to watch some stuff that we really enjoyed. And I got a kick out of a post that you put up the other day. Netflix, you're screwing up a lot, but the skip intro button is really cool.
Oh, absolutely.
And I echo that because I having to watch the Hawaii 5-0 is an intro every time. It's only 30 seconds long, but come on. You can only put up with it for so long.
There's certain shows, if you go watch, did you ever watch Homeland?
Yes.
Luckily, this is not on Netflix, so I don't have to suffer through. But it is on Netflix outside the U.S. So every time I travel outside the U.S., I watch Homeland, and their intro is like 2.5 minutes long.
Yeah.
And it's not interesting or fun to watch or anything. And so that skip intro button is fantastic. Okay, we have like 5 more minutes. Let's talk Oscars now that we've talked for almost an hour. Maybe there's some more winners out. Here's the thing. I really struggle with caring. I don't care.
You're not supposed to.
What I more... That's right, Todd. You're not supposed to. And none of us are supposed to. And that's why we're only devoting 5 minutes to this.
No. That's not what I'm trying to say, Craig. That's not what I'm trying to say. The Oscars aren't made for you. You're a movie goer. You're not a movie maker.
Right, and neither are you. And neither are almost anybody who's listening to this.
But as an actor...
Oh... Okay.
I'm gonna fight you on this one.
No. I know exactly what you're saying, and I get it, and I kind of agree with you. But here's my biggest problem with the Oscars.
Go.
Aside from the moral masturbation that goes on for 4 hours every February, March, whatever.
Moral/political/ whatever messages it is that we're going to run with.
It's exhausting and disgusting and horrible. But the dresses are pretty, I guess. No, but my biggest problem with it is that it has all these categories, and each of the categories, they kind of separate. They try to separate it into like Best Picture and Best Actor and all the big stuff, and then there's the technical categories off to the side.
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, these are all technical categories.
Yes.
And they should be treated as such, and they should not be voted on by, a big group of nothing but actors and directors.
Well, that's what the People's Choice Awards are, and the Golden Globes.
Right, and that's why, like, when I'm watching, I don't watch them, but when I see the winners for like the SAG Awards, I'm really interested in who won the Best Actor and Best Actress at the SAG Awards, because that's the Screen Actors Guild voting on who the Best Actor and Actress are. What I would like to see from the Oscars, if I don't know if this would make them more relevant, but it would make them more honest, is if the different unions all voted in their own categories.
Right.
And so, like, you have a bunch of actors and who don't know the difference between sound editing and sound mixing.
Well,
and how are they going to vote on this? All they're going to do is they're going to say, "Oh, well, I liked Coco. That was nice. I'll just give it to that," or whatever.
To be fair, when we're looking at the Oscars, the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences divides up those technical awards, and unless you've been involved in one of those sides, you don't get to vote on that side. So unless you've been a director, you don't get to vote on directing. Unless you've been involved in the sound engineering, and you don't get to vote on the sound mixing qualities. However, they are very much insider awards, and they're a little bit more broad than, say, special technical or special delivery awards like the Screen Actors Guild Awards, which are just the screen acting. There, and if you've done other things, you still don't get to vote on those. But to your point, you're right. You don't care, and those of us who I've done Oscar parties several years. There was one year that we decided that we were going to have some fun. We all dressed up in tuxes. We had a wonderful reception ahead of time. The gals were wearing beautiful evening gowns. Guys were wearing tuxes. We actually muted all of the speeches because none of us wanted to listen to them anyway, and so we gave the acceptance speeches that they probably were giving, and we did a pretty decent job. We had a lot of fun with it.
That sounds like my actual nightmare.
I'm sure.
Did either of you watch? Because the Oscars started about an hour and a half before we started recording, and we had it on while we were putting kids to bed and whatever. Did either of you watch Jimmy Kimmel's opening monologue?
No. Why would I do that?
I'm gonna catch it tomorrow morning.
Maybe you had it on.
Too.
But he said something in the opening monologue that sums this up perfectly. He said something about how there's only one of the films nominated this year for Best Film made over $100 million. So everything else made less than $100 million. And my wife,
Dunkirk.
Yes, it would have been.
But my wife in the kitchen says, "Oh, so they're all movies that nobody watches."
Yes,
correct.
Which is yeah, absolutely, and I think that just sums that up perfectly.
Except for
nobody cares about.
But there is one thing I will say. And that is, as I look through the list, and let me just pull up the list here of not original screenplay. I want to look up
Best Picture.
Best Picture. Call Me By Your Name, Darkest Hour, Dunkirk, Get Out, Lady Bird, Phantom Thread, The Post, The Shape of Water, Three Billboards. All of these movies, to one degree or another, are they are not built on existing IP. Now, it's sort of a double-edged sword, because I think that there are some really, really great, deserving movies
Sure.
that are part of a franchise, and they get unfairly maligned. But on the other hand, I do really appreciate the originality of these, even if I have seen precisely, looking again, nope,
Two?
none of these.
You haven't seen The Post?
I've seen. Why would I watch The Post? I'm not going to watch The Post.
You didn't see
Todd,
Dunkirk?
are you freaking kidding me?
You haven't seen Dunkirk?
No, I wanted to, but I was pretty busy at that point, so I never did get around to it.
I'm surprised.
I know. I should have seen Dunkirk. Anyway, but my point is just I did appreciate that these are original movies and that they're being celebrated. So even if nobody saw them, at least we're appreciating original work here.
The Oscars is generally good for that. The kinds of movies that get nominated for Best Picture oftentimes are they have to have some level of originality. And a friend of mine had this discussion, and Ryan would probably be rolling over in his seat and just fidgeting madly right now.
I'm so glad he's not here right now.
But he would probably agree that the one thing that is looked for when they start talking about Best Picture, and that is one category where everybody that's a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences gets to vote in, and that is that it's all about advancing the media of film. And so if they're using film in a new way, if they're using film to tell different kinds of stories, if they're using film to explore new territory, that's really what the Best Picture and what the issue is about all of these kinds of things. And it's why in many cases blockbuster films don't make it onto the Best Picture list, because they're not generally pushing the medium of film as a storytelling medium the same way that some of these other films are.
Yeah, and I don't know that I would say pushing into new boundaries, but I would say the one thing I think that a lot of these Best Picture nominees have going for them is that they're all very level 2 stories. When we talk about Legendarium level 1, level 2, level 3, almost all of them are on that level 2 spectrum.
Incredibly political.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. There's one thing that there's one movie that I want to mention that doesn't normally fall into our stuff that I watched that did not get recognized at all, that I really enjoyed, that I want to share with you guys. I don't know that you guys have...
Now's the time where you say what it was.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I have your attention, because normally you're looking away from me when I say I have something good.
Yeah, Todd, I've got other things to do. Just say it.
Murder on the Orient Express.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't going to watch that.
You know what? Wonderful film. Beautiful film. Really enjoyed it. Even if you've already read the story, even if you're familiar with Agatha Christie's, even if you're familiar with the original Murder on the Orient Express, I think this one did a wonderful job of taking because the kind of film that was available then and the kind of film techniques that are available now are different, and I really enjoyed the film. It doesn't hurt that I like Kenneth Branagh as both an actor and a director, and it doesn't hurt that I like Patrick Doyle as a composer, because he did the music for Henry V. He also did much of the music for this. Great film.
And Harry Potter 4, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So.
Nicely done.
Yeah, I know my Potter films a little bit, at least. I don't know. Okay, we'd better go. It's been an hour of us pontificating on nothing. So, yeah, I mean, sorry everybody that this wasn't about Oathbringer, but hopefully it's fun anyway. And hopefully it gives you something to go watch if there was anything on our list that
or
that
post
you hadn't
because you're
seen
irritated
yet.
about.
Go to thelegendarium.reddit.com and tell us why we're wrong about the Oscars or
Black Panther
or whatever. That's fine. I can take the abuse. It's fine. And go to patreon.com/legendarium to support the show based on episodes other than this one.
Please don't go there and unsubscribe.
Exactly. And anyway, so we we'll see everybody next week. We are working on scheduling well ahead of time the Oathbringer episode, and so that is scheduled now to happen next weekend.
Aren't we winding down on Narnia too? So we're
Narnia's got 2 more.
getting ready for some.
Kyle's excited to come
Kingkiller.
back for Kingkiller Chronicles. Kingkiller Chronicle? I don't know if there's an S on it. I don't care.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's 2 books out, right? That makes it a
Yeah.
Chronicles.
Well,
We went from
we'll get there.
Chronicles of Narnia to Kingkiller Chronicle. I
The
don't know.
Chronic What Coals of King Killers. All right.
We love
So
our Chronic.
let's go, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
All right. So that recording's over. Everybody on YouTube. I know a few people popped in and out while we were going. I don't think
Came
we
in,
ever...
Oathbringer, go out.
Yeah, it's not Oathbringer. Yeah, no, that's not what I signed up for.
Abort.
There should be a big
That's like
red
one of those
alert
like
sign.
Mission Impossible. This is your mission. Should you choose to accept it? Do they ever not accept it? Do they ever just say,
Well, that's
"No, I choose not to"? Yeah. Who is that?
wasn't there just a joke about
Yeah,
that?
we were talking about it at work, but I'm just thinking like
Yeah.
abort. Anyways.
All right. Well, Steven stuck around for most of it. Thanks
Hey,
for hanging
Steven.
around, Steven. Anyway, so yeah, if you guys, if you watch this later when YouTube posts it, yeah, you are still here. If you watch it later when YouTube posts it, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, like I mentioned toward the beginning, this is something I think we should do for some of these smaller episodes.
Sure.
The bigger ones will be a little bit more of a production. But
Dancing
anyway,
girls, confetti cannons.
I would love to get a dancing girl shot out of a confetti cannon in the studio.
Let's be honest. If we're not prepared to just talk about the shows, we're definitely not going to put in the effort to create the video for it. So these short ones, yeah, we're good. Whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. You guys good?
I'm good.
Okay, everybody. We'll